Okay, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon to some of you. Welcome. I'm Katrina Williams, the Senior Marketing Manager at BDI, and I'm here with Angela today. And we're so excited to talk with you all. I'm just going to kick off the webinar with a couple housekeeping things before Angela starts. So as people are coming in, I just want to remind everyone that the only people attending this webinar today are BDI client partners, which is pretty unique for our webinars. So I just want to encourage you to utilize the chat bar on the right-hand side of your screen. Go ahead, say hi to one another, introduce yourself with your name, what organization you're part of, and if there's anything you're excited about for today's webinar. Angela will do a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, you can enter them into the chat at any time, and she'll go back and address them after her presentation. But the chat is also just a great place to share ideas and get feedback from other rescue mission leaders that are here in the room. So please utilize that. Just one more thing, if you look above the chat bar, there's a tab that says handouts. You'll be able to access and download the slides from today's webinar on that tab. So you go ahead before you leave the room and download it if you want the slides. We'll also send you all a recording of this webinar in your email after it is over. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. Please help me in welcoming BDI's Senior Director of Data Management, Angela.
Thank you so much, Kat. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that you can join me again for going through our acquisition responses. And for new people attending, thank you for attending. We will be walking through everything that you need to know about how to process direct mail and saturation responses. So let's begin. Okay, this fall, your mission is participating in the new donor acquisition program. Today, we're going to discuss the direct mail portion of the program and how to capture information your mission needs to accurately track acquisition results. So let's just go through the overview of what that looks like for direct mail acquisition. You have 6 drops. We have for Thanksgiving. We have a new touch point this year of a postcard, and then we have 2 Christmas. The first one up is your pre-Thanksgiving, which is in-home around September 5th. Drop 2 will be our Thanksgiving main, which will be in-home Tuesday, September 19th. Then we have our Thanksgiving follow-up. That will be in-home Tuesday, October 10th. Our last chance is our drop 4, and that will be in-home on October 24th. Then for some people, we will have an additional postcard touch point that is a digital QR code touch point. That's in-home on November 1st. But then we go straight into our main Christmas acquisition that is in-home Wednesday, November 15th. And then our last drop of the season is the Christmas follow-up, which is on Thursday, November 30th. Now we have 3 different types of lists that we mail to. We mail to rental lists, which are new donor acquisition. We mail to lapsed, no mail, or deceased list. That is your lapsed donor reactivation. And then some people do send in some other lists like GIK, volunteers, or other lists that we're trying to turn supporters into financial donors. Now let's go through rental lists. So as you can see, we have a lot of codes there. We mail to a couple of hundred different lists. We're testing new lists this year. Capturing that list code is critically important for me. They are new donors when they're responding, and they are responding from prospect lists. So as they are not in your database already, you will need to add them as the gifts arrive. So you're adding them to the database and you're posting your gift. Next, we will review the lapsed donor reactivation lists. And we have a couple of slides on these. So these are list codes 200 to 302, and they are reactivating. They are already in your database. So on this slide, you will see the codes 300, which is lapsed year 3, 301 is lapsed year 4, 302, year 5, and 200, year 6. This slide, you'll see lapsed year 7 is code 201, 205 is lapsed year 8, 206 is lapsed year 9, and then 207 is lapsed year 10. Now, 207 requires special handling as it mails as friend with the donor's address. It doesn't have their name, but it also does not have their donor ID. We strip the donor ID off and we use a prospect ID, or you may hear it called a finder ID, or you'll hear it as dummy ID. Those are three in the same. Now on this side, you'll see code 208. That is also lapsed year 10, and I will explain that to you. Code 209 is lapsed year 11 plus, so that's all the rest of your lapsed donors, along with 211 is year 11 plus also. Now, for 209, it's very similar to 207. That mails as friend with the dummy ID. You will be looking it up by the address when it comes in to find that donor, and I will talk about that. Codes 208 and 211, let me go back to that. 208 and 211, they're year 10 and 11 plus, and we've been doing this the last couple of years. They're lapsed, but they also matched to various rental lists, and we were able to verify their name and address. So we tested the last several years, and it's been doing pretty well of putting their name and their donor ID. It makes it easier for you to be able to put these into your database. And then if the responder is one of your lapsed donors who is reactivating, hey, I love it, great news, they do very well. You're gonna post that gift and you're gonna update the record if necessary. But I always caution, make sure you look at that, and if there's old flags on there that say, you know, do not mail or something, remove that flag. Now, if the responder is not the original lapsed record, you're going to add that responder as a new donor and you're going to post that gift. Then go back to that original lapsed donor and place a code of do not prospect, or if you call it something different in there, you certainly can. This will prevent the donor from being mailed in the future since they're no longer living at that address. But make sure, and I caution, make sure when you are pulling your query, when you're pulling the eligible file for the data specialist, update your query for that eligible by including the do not prospect, so that that would be an exclusion, so we wouldn't be including them in any other eligible mailings. Then we have two other list codes. List code 203 is your no mail donors that you send in. We mail them all as friend with a dummy ID. Now, if the no mail donor responds, you're gonna look that donor up and confirm that information, and then you would post that gift. Remove the no mail flag on there and update the record if necessary. So now if the responder is not the original no mail record, you would go back and add them as a new donor and post that gift. But then you'd want to go back to that original lapsed donor or the no mail donor, and you would mark them as do not prospect, or however you're marking them. This will prevent them from being mailed in the future since they're no longer at that address. Make sure to update your query again for the eligible file by including do not prospect in your eligible query as an exclusion. And then there's other things that can happen. If the responder is the no mail person, but they ask not to be prospected to again or mailed to, flag them as do not prospect or do not mail. Make sure to update your query again for your eligible so that they're not in the eligible file for your cultivation mailings. And then in addition, we'll talk about this, always send these to your data specialist so that we can try to remove them from future acquisition drops. Okay, now list code 204, that is the deceased file. We mail these also. They all go as friend with the address and a dummy ID. Now, the responders to a deceased record are most likely new donors who reside at the deceased record's address. If they're a new donor, then you add them to your database and post the gift. Now, we talk about this and laugh about it. If by chance it is the deceased person themselves and they do respond, hey, great, post the gift, but remove the deceased flag since they're no longer deceased. And that will, failure to remove that though, will prevent the reactivated donor from being mailed in your cultivation mailings. Okay, now let's look at some of those house lists I was talking about that we're trying to take mission supporters and turning them into financial donors. List code 202 is GIK and 210 is volunteer. If the GIK or volunteer responds, post that gift and update the record if necessary. And again, I always talk about that. Double check the flags and make sure to remove any old flags from that donor's record. Now, if it's not the original person for any reason, add that responder as a new donor and post the gift. Also, I know that a lot of people have volunteers outside of their list that we're mailing to. They'll be mailed with a dummy ID along with the name. If you're getting a response to that, you're adding them into your database now because now they are a financial supporter. That's great. All right, so we reviewed all of the list codes. Now we have additional areas that will help you to successfully enter gifts this fall. I talk about finder files. That's a file that contains all your new donors that we mail during the acquisition season. They are just for the direct mail rental lists, but I can also include the deeply lapsed people that we mail out that have a finder ID. The whole purpose of this is to help you accurately process your gifts when you're adding the new donors into the system. You can either preload it into the system or you can use it as a lookup table. I've provided files to clients that they use as a lookup table. If you're interested in doing this for the first time, just shoot me an email and we can start the process together. I also have a special note for any clients here that are on Donor Perfect that are also AccuBank. AccuBank is a company that helps to process the remits through a system. They have a special way that we produce a special finder file. I'll be sending that out either tomorrow or next week with your campaign codes. This is something that you will send to the Service Bureau through this email, and always copy me on it that I can help make sure this is happening. You will send that out to them. It'll get loaded to the system so you're ready for when we're processing responses. In addition, make sure after 6 months, you notify them to remove any records that did not have a gift associated to it. And for anybody using a finder file, regardless, make sure after 6 months, you're having those records that do not have any gifts associated. Make sure to remove those so they aren't inflating your counts. Then list codes. So, I talked about all of these list codes. We will be sending out the campaign codes along with the list codes and anybody that has a finder file. The data services team is prepping them tomorrow, and we will be getting out either starting tomorrow or the beginning, middle of next week, so that you'll have everything in preparation before your first in-home. Okay, now for donor requests. I want to go through 2 audiences that we've had some questions on about do not prospect. So do not prospect first. If a prospect from a rental list contacts the mission and requests not to be solicited to, you would either add the name and address into your database and mark them as do not prospect so that we're not marking them for the future. A lot of people cannot add them into the database, and so you would use an Excel file, and I'll be happy to have Kat upload that so that you can have that available, or I can send it to you. But this is the way to capture people that are coming in saying, I don't want to be prospected to any further. During the season, keep track of these prospects and email them to your data services team either daily or weekly, whatever cadence works for you. And then for me, it'll be easier to be able to remove them, but keep track of them all year during the season. Some clients also have one they've kept year over year and they're just adding to it. That's fabulous. The big thing is when we request data in May for next year, you send this list in as an MP2, that's the big suppression file. We will suppress them based off of their last name and address. And then there's the no mail. So you've got the no mail flag. The no mail flag should be applied to existing donors on your database who do not wish to receive any mail. Also, a no mail donor is an actual donor record that lives in your database who has a preference of no mail. They can even be a donor who is an active giver but does not want direct mail. So just make sure you put that flag on there. Okay, now I'm going to actually walk through some of the examples from drop 1 and drop 2 that I pulled out just to see some of the new changes that we have this year. So first up, I'm going to grab, where is my pointer? Okay, so as you can see, I'm going to go over here. You're looking at the remits for the first drop 1. You're going to see that we have some custom coding changes here. You see an R at the end. For our lovely friends at Great Falls, we did something very different for them, but it stays the same. Don't worry, Samantha, if you're there. But this, for our friends in Allentown, this is the scan line that they have on here. It's different clients have different scan lines. You'll see some on the next slide too. But the big thing is you're capturing this code and you're capturing this code. That is your campaign code and your list code. Very critical for helping me to measure results. The same thing here, you'll see this is the campaign code that actually includes that list code right here. So what you're seeing at the end here is you have a typical campaign code that we used to have that ended in 99. We've changed the end to be an R for rental lists and an H for house lists. This is going to absolutely help me in being able to look at results very quickly on house versus rental, and also look at percentages that we're mailing across both. Additionally, here is drop 2, and I have my friends from Wheeler Mission and from City Union in Kansas City. You're looking at different types of scan lines that are available across different platforms. And in the case here, Anna at Wheeler Mission has a full scan line here, and embedded here, Anna, you see the R, it'll be ending in R. I know that 601 is a rental list. So this is helping me to be able to get the results in that I need to be able to pull properly. You're seeing these as OCRA, different types of scan lines. For our friends in Kansas City, they have a 3 of 9 barcode that has the human readable here. And again, you see it ending in R along with the 3-digit list code. This is telling me 607 is again a rental list. Like I said, I wanted to show you different examples of the types of barcodes that people are using based off of different scanning or hand keying to help with processing. And then we also do saturation. For all of you participating in saturation, these are all processed in the same fashion. This is, saturation pieces are filled out by hand by the donor, and you are capturing these results by hand. They can't be scanned in. Also, the vehicles do not have a list code. It's just a campaign code. But as I will show you next, it's a very specific campaign code. So I want to make sure I walk through it, so if you have any questions, we can talk through it. Now, if the responder does not exist in your database, you're going to add them as a new donor to your database and post the gift. If they do exist, they're either going to be a lapsed donor or no mail or deceased. You're going to post that gift and update the record if necessary. Just double check flags and make sure that you are addressing it properly. Now, here are 4 different types of saturation mailings that we're doing, but they look very similar, but very different codes mean something else. So here is for Thanksgiving. You will see we have a code here that ends in 90. And then you see here a code that ends in 91. These are 2 entirely different saturation packages. I highly suggest that you take a look when you are entering gifts, because again, like I said, the donor is going to enter this information by hand here. Double check this code every time you're doing that. And then again, you can see 2 more pieces that look the same, but have different codes. They're very different saturation pieces. So you can see this one ends in 92 and this one ends in 93. So what I wanted to stress to everyone and highly suggest is that for your processing team, work in batches. So as you can see, these look the same. So when they are receiving these remits, have them batch them by separating them into like pieces, but then also taking a look at the bottom right. It's always going to be in the bottom right, and have them look at the code and then separate by code. It will make it so much easier to be able to enter the information consistently and accurately. For us, it's going to help me in making better informed decisions on the type of saturation mailings that I would want to recommend with client services. Okay, now that was the pieces. Now, we also have a new donor bonding program. So for anyone participating in the new donor bonding program, that file request contains new and reactivated donors beginning the week of September 5th. The person that runs this for us is our lovely data services supervisor, Letty Lopez. She will be providing those file requests weekly for you. Please take careful note of the dates provided, the date range in the data file request, making sure that we're accurately selecting new and reactivated donors for the program. For anyone not familiar with this program, talk to your client service account strategist for more information. But briefly, it's the first touch point for new and reactivated donors coming in this fall. It runs for 14 weeks, and it consists of a survey and a phone call. And that is it. It's 20 minutes of intense, fun stuff, but I just want to thank you again for joining and for a first time. I know it's a lot of information, but being able to have access to this, I think will be really critical to being able to help train your team also. And I'm always available for questions, but I just appreciate you coming in and sharing. And again, if I can be of any help, there's my information. A lot of you know me. I'm happy to help anytime.
Great. Thanks, Angela. That was great. And we have several questions that have been asked in the chat. So I figured we can share. Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
That works.
Great.
And we'll just read through the questions. And if anybody else has questions for Angela, you can enter them into the chat now and we'll go through them.
Okay. So let's
Okay. Okay, so
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Kat. Facilitate.
No. Go ahead.
I wasn't sure about the first question coming in.
Okay, so it looks like the first question I have is from Anna, and she's asking, can we change the name of a donor instead of adding a whole new donor to the states that do not mail?
Oh, absolutely. You can absolutely. Now, the whole thing is, if it's an entirely new name, you would be changing all of the gifts in there, correct? So you'd have to make that determination of, if I'm changing the name, am I changing all the gift records, or am I just starting new with this new person? Typically, if it's a new person at that address, you'd want to get their history from their inception, because what will happen is I won't have, if they have previous gifts, that first gift date now belongs to that ID number. So by being able to put them in as a new donor, you start their history, you start the criteria from there, and you go forward. So again, I would highly suggest you would start with a new one, unless it's a family member and they're just another member is doing that. You can absolutely do that because it's containing the household information.
Mm-hmm.
I did see a note, Kat, about how often should we send the do not prospect list?
Yes.
So for that, I'm sorry, I'm here. I would send it at least weekly, and the data specialist, you copy your data specialist along with me. I will always work on that with each of them. And our data specialists are Julie and Jennifer and Letty and Angel and Benny. They work with me closely on all of the files on a monthly basis with acquisition. So I've told people to send it on a single day. I know in Long Beach I would get it on a Friday, but people would send it. But it's whatever works for your cadence. But I will say that using the Excel grid and having an ongoing one is always very helpful to use for removal as suppression for the next year.
Great. Okay, yeah, that question was for Patty at Rescue Mission of Middle Georgia.
Oh, cool.
Okay, next question is from Michelle. This was during the section where you're talking about configuration for scan lines.
Oh,
So
yes.
her question was, will this change, the change that you were talking about, affect existing configurations for scan lines?
Got it. So the campaign code is now, it's the same length. We just changed the last digit from a 9 to an R or an H. So it doesn't change the configuration. It will just be in a scan line when you have a counter. It will just count it so it calculates the check digit properly. Now, if you have any concerns, for certain, reach out to me separately, and I will dive into your client specifically.
Okay. Okay, great. Next question is from Penny. She asked, what should we use if they're sending the tickets without the remit?
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So that ticket should have that information, but sometimes they send it in. If there is a code anywhere on a piece, you would capture that. If not, typically you would put it to white mail. Now, if you don't have an existing white mail code, you would use you can just use fall acquisition or Thanksgiving acquisition, Christmas acquisition with the WM. So for me, a lot of clients have their own specific rules around white mail, but for anybody that doesn't, for acquisition season, you can do THX, ACQ, WM, or XMAS, ACQ, DM, or WM. And that is something that I can absolutely look at. We do a match back at the end of the year by picking up codes, and we match back to people during that time frame to verify if they did white mail or if they went online and gave a gift. So we do at some point do that, but that will absolutely help me in getting to that information quicker.
Great. Okay. Okay, next, and if any of you have follow-up questions, if Angela answers your question, please enter them in the chat and we'll address them. But if not, I'm just going to keep going down the list here. Next is from Dolores. She asks, when is the last time to send in do not send mail files?
Got it. So our last in home is on November 30th, and typically we are processing everything for that last drop at the end of September. So we really have until the end of September to be able to remove any of those from direct mail acquisition. But Dolores, I can absolutely make a note and I will follow up if that is not the case. But I'm just thinking of it from last year when we had this conversation. I believe it's right around the end of September.
Okay. Okay, next question's from Marlena. She says, just to clarify, do we remove Finder files after 6 months if there are no gifts?
Yes. So typically what I say is around 6 months. I've worked with, my friends at Kansas City Rescue Mission, also City Union. We try to do it at the end of February, just to try to get any of those stragglers in. It depends on how accurate and how you've been able to process any of your year-end giving. Sometimes you may have an outside team that is doing it and they haven't processed everything yet. So you want to be really careful. It depends on the cadence of how often things are getting entered into your system. You want to make sure that all remits for all acquisition are getting entered before you remove everything. And honestly, if you remove it at the end of February, if anything does come in, it's a very small amount that you would just hand enter.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great question.
Okay, next is from Jonathan. He asks, who makes the phone calls for our new donor bonding program?
Oh, that's a great question. So that is, our production team works with a company that is actually sending out an automated phone call. It's one of our vendor partners that production works with to do that. I'm not sure of the specifics of it. I just know that from a data perspective, we're delivering data accurately for new and reactivated donors so that every week, so that they're able to get into the survey and then that automated phone call. But Jonathan, any further questions, certainly reach out to your your specialist or your strategist for any other specifics that they may have.
Great. Okay, next is from Meredith. Are there any other common data entry mistakes during acquisition season that we should be watching out for?
Great question. So I think the biggest thing that you can do that we learned years ago is the batch process. Batch process is really putting like things together and making sure that the team that is entering, or if it's even a single person, having a sample of what that looks like so that they understand it and highlighting that code. That's really great. That's always helped me. I'd like to send those out. So even in this PowerPoint, you have samples or examples of pieces using this to help educate, to look at the piece, to look at the size of the piece and batch those together, then double check the codes. You look at those campaign codes. We'll have the entire list of all the campaign codes so that you know what to expect and when to expect it. But I highly encourage batching. Also making sure that if you have multiple people keying things in, make sure they're keying everything in the same, in the right places. Sometimes people, they will see a 0, but it's actually an O. So you need to be careful about the 0 or the capital O. Those are common mistakes that happen. And then I think the biggest thing is if something doesn't scan, for some reason, make sure that you're checking back in with production or you're checking back in with us. We'll see if there's any issues. But sometimes if the donor folded something and the scan line isn't working, you may have to hand key. We try to put human readable on there to make it easier for you to hand key. But again, common mistakes, I think, are the biggest of making sure that if you are not entering in the right information and you're typing in the wrong ones. So it's probably like an edit verify that you need to do after every batch.
Great. And Michelle jumped in here as well, and she said duplicates would be another one.
Oh, great. Love you, Michelle. Thank you. So that happens. So what's great about acquisition is there's certain groups that may get mailed, 3, 4, 5 times, and you may get and I'll talk about the duplicates also. You will get a new donor that comes in and you post that gift and they gave again. This happens. You need to watch out for that to make sure that you're not adding them in again so that you're duplicating them. But also you're getting responses sometimes that when we're doing a merge purge process, it is to try to remove any duplicates, and it's based off a match key. And if the names are spelled differently, especially rental lists, because we go across multiple rental lists, and sometimes people have hyphenated names and their maiden name, and it's not always catching, and you may have a duplicate that is going out to the same address but different last names. That will happen on occasion. So you just need to watch out for that to make sure that when you're entering it, double check and make sure that address isn't already in there with that person's name. And it's that whole idea of edit and verify. When you get it, double check to make sure they don't exist in the database already, especially as you get going down into the further drops, they may have already responded. So you always want to double check to make sure that you're not creating duplicates.
Great. Okay, it looks like this might be our last question from Kenan. Can you explain how scan lines work as opposed to manual input?
Yes. So there's multiple types of scan lines, and on this call we have many of our partners that use different types of systems to scan. There are wands that they can scan and it'll go into the system. There are lock boxes. We have teams that are on here that are from the lockbox that they are entering them. They may be scanning them. They may be doing things differently. There's 3 of 9 barcodes that are getting scanned in. There's OCRA, where we have different companies that actually have hardware and software that it takes the remits and the checks and it'll scan them in and it'll bring them up into the system automatically because a Finder file is preloaded. So there's different types. It just depends on the amount of mail returns that you get on a yearly basis, we'd make a recommendation on the type of service that you would want. If you'd want a lockbox or a caging company, or you'd want hardware on site to be able to have your staff do it yourself, or if you use a wand and you want to scan it with the wand and it automatically uploads into your system. There's many ways of doing it, and if there's something specific, send me an email and I can have our database manager, Ari Devlin, look into your type of database and make recommendations based off of that.
Okay, great. Well, if there are not any other questions, I think that's it. If you think of any other questions, please just reach out to Angela or your account team, and they can, point you in the right direction of who will be able to answer that question, or they'll connect you with Angela. So thank you all for attending today. And don't forget, if you want the slides, to go into the handouts tab and you can download them there. But we'll also send you all a recording of this webinar too.
Yes, and don't forget, you're going to be getting campaign codes and finder files. We will definitely, if anybody wants a finder file, make sure you reach out to me. We can talk through the specifics of it. But again, Kat, thank you. And partners, all of you, you're wonderful. Thank you so much for joining today.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.